Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
We will go into constitutional development in Nigeria. First of all, we will look into pre-independence constitutions. First of all, we have the Clifford Constitution of 1922. It had its features to include the following. Number one, we had the Secretary of State for Colonies, who was a cabinet minister in Britain, and the Secretary of State for Colonies. All the colonial governors reported to the Secretary of State for Colonies. Number two, the head of state was Governor Hoy Clifford, who represented the Queen of England. Number three, the Executive Council was an all-European council. No Nigerian was a member, meaning that Nigerians were not part of the decision-making body. Number four, the Lawmaking Council, which comprised of a 46 membership, is made up to be the following. 27 members out of the 46 were officials, while 19 were unofficial members. 10 out of the 19 were Nigerians. Out of the 10 Nigerians, 4 were elected. 3 were elected from Lagos and 1 from Calabar. The remaining 6 were appointed by the governor to represent other parts of the country. However, the Northern Protectorate was not part of this council. Number 5, the North was to be governed by proclamation emanating from the governor. Number 6, Clifford's Constitution established for the first time elective principle. That is to say that elections were to be conducted in the Lawmaking Council. Number 7, it also gave rise to political activities and formation of political parties, especially in Lagos and Calabar. Example, the NNDP of Herbert Macaulay. These are the features of the Clifford Constitution of 1922. We go into the next one, which is Richard's Constitution of 1946. Listen and note this. The governor of Nigeria at the outbreak of the Second World War was Sir Budillion. He was in office between 1939 and 1944. In 1939, the Northern and Southern protectorates were made provinces. Northern Nigeria remained a province, and Southern Nigeria was broken into two, Eastern and Western provinces. At the time of Sir Budillion's retirement in 1944, he had almost concluded the new constitution, where he proposed regionalism. So Sir Richard's Constitution of 1946 replaced Clifford Constitution of 1922. The new constitution was published and tailored specifically to promote the unity of Nigeria and enhance greater participation of Nigerians in their own affairs. Features of the 1946 Richard's Constitution. Number 1, the Central Executive Council of Richards was dominated by Europeans, as in the Clifford Constitution of 1922. Richards was the president of the council. Number 2, the membership of the Nigerian Central lawmaking council was 44. 16 were official and 28 unofficial members. The governor, chief secretary of the government, the 3 chief commissioners of the provinces were official members. 4 were to be elected, 3 for Lagos and 1 for Calabar, in a franchise of 120 respectively. Under this new constitution, these 4 will be selected by the regional councils and to be set up in each region. Number 3. The Richard's constitution also led to the creation of houses of assembly or regional houses of assembly. The assembly members were to be elected by the native authorities, while the regional assembly members were to elect members of the central lawmaking council through the electoral college. Number 4. The constitution granted the North a bicameral legislature, regional assembly and the regional house of chiefs. All first-class chiefs were members by right. Number 5. The regional assemblies were given limited powers to legislate on minor matters subject to the governor's reserved powers. These are some of the features of the 1946 Richard's Constitution in Nigeria. What and what did this Richard's Constitution achieve? Number 1, its foremost achievement was the introduction of regionalism in Nigeria. The former 3 provinces gave way to 3 regions. That means we had the northern region, the eastern region, and the western region. Number 2, the north and the south were brought together for legislation. Number 3, the full-blown federal structure of 1954 was laid down by this constitution. That is to say, that it brought about passive federalism in Nigeria. Number 3, the full-blown federal structure of 1954 was laid down by Richard's Constitution of 1946. Number 4, it also gave the unofficial members a majority in the lawmaking council. Number 5, it also gave room for many Nigerians to be represented in the lawmaking council, even though they did that in an unofficial capacity. Number 6, it brought together for the very first time northern and southern Nigeria, making for the unity of the country. Number 7, the North had houses of assembly and chiefs, thereby introducing bicameralism into the system, even though East and West had only unicameral legislature. These are the achievements of Richard's Constitution of 1946. Weaknesses of Richard's Constitution. Number 1, it was still dominated by Europeans. Changes were not made. Number 2, it was retained by Richards, and Lagos and Calabar were only favored. This principle of elective representation was not extended to other parts of the country. Number 3, the country was divided into 3 unequal regions, making the North larger than the other 2 combined. Number 4, limited powers were given to the regional assemblies to legislate on minor matters, and this should be subject to the governor's reserved powers. Number 5. The chiefs were nominated and not elected into the legislative council. Therefore, they mainly represented the interest of those that put them into the council. Having come to the end of our study on the weakness of Richard's Constitution of 1946, we will now go into the next constitution, which is the Macpherson's Constitution of 1951. Sir John Macpherson became the new governor of Nigeria after Richards, and he made adequate arrangements not to repeat the mistake that led to the opposition and to the criticisms that greeted Richard's constitution. So in March 1949, he selected a committee of the Lawmaking Council to examine the problems that may likely face the introduction of a new constitution. This committee agreed that a wide measure of consultation with the people right from the village level should be the procedure that to be followed. This was also followed by a general conference, membership of which would involve all unofficial members of the Lawmaking Council and also those that will represent each region in the council. Macpherson Constitution was assumed to be homemade. The reason why we could say it was homemade was because it involved the people at the grassroots. It also involved the village. Having concluded on the weakness of Richard's Constitution of 1946, we will look into the next constitution, which is that of Macpherson, which came into effect in 1951. It will interest you to know that Sir John Macpherson became the new governor of Nigeria after Richards, and he made adequate arrangements not to repeat the mistake that led to the opposition and also led to the criticisms that greeted the constitution of Richard, which came before its own. So in March 1949, he set up a committee to examine the problems that may likely face the invention of a new constitution. The committee agreed that a wide measure of consultation with the people right from the village level should be followed, and this was also followed by a general conference, membership of which would involve all unofficial members of the Law-Making Council and also those that will represent each of the region in their various council. That is to say, and we can also say that the Macpherson Constitution was assumed to be homemade, reason being because it involved the membership of the people right from the village. We now go into the features of the Constitution. Number 1, a House of Representatives was created and also known as the Central Legislature. It was made up of 148 membership, and 136 of them were to be elected by the Nigerian members of the regional legislature, 68 from the north, 34 each from the east and western houses of assembly. 6 members were to be appointed by the governor to represent those not properly represented, and the other 6 would be ex-officio members, the 3 lieutenants, governors, the chief secretary, the finance secretary, and the attorney general. Laws made must be assented to by the governor before they could become laws. However, this house had limited powers. It had no power over bills, relating to public service and public revenue, and this was because the governor possessed wide reserved powers. Number 2, the governor was the president of the Council of Ministers. Others were 6 official members charged with issues relating to civil service, defense, legal matters, and the 12th minister, 4 representing each region, and to come from the House of Representatives. Each minister was not executive head of any department, but responsibility was given to each over initiating discussion of policy in the council. Number 3, the northern and western regions each had a bicameral legislature, houses of assembly and chiefs. The eastern region had only a house of assembly. Each regional legislature had the power to make laws on specific matters, for example, on local matters, on social welfare, local government, native courts, health, and etc. Number 4, each region was provided with an executive council with lieutenant governor as the president. The council advised the governor, but he could reject or accept such advice. These are some of the features of the Macpherson Constitution of 1951. We now go into the weaknesses of the Constitution of Macpherson. Number 1, the existence of regional politics succeeded in weakening the central legislature, which is to say that those at the center were more loyal to their regions. Number 2, the Constitution made no provision for a responsible government at the center. Number 3, the exclusion of Nnamdi Azikiwe from the central legislature led to the crisis in the Eastern House of Assembly. Number 4, the motion for self-rule, which was moved by Anthony Anahoro in 1953 in the House of Representatives, was rejected by northern politicians, and it caused bad blood between northern and southern politicians. The Kano riots of 1953 demonstrated the weakness and failures of Macpherson Constitution. Number 6, the 1951 Constitution still provided for an all-powerful governor with veto power to legislate on any matter in the country. Number 7, the Constitution encouraged ethnic nationalism and the emergence of political parties along tribal lines. For example, the MPC was for the Northern Tribe, the AG was for the Western Tribe, and the NCNC was for the Eastern Tribe. These are the weaknesses of the Macpherson Constitution of 1951. We'll go to the next one, which is the Constitution of 1954, which we'll call Oliver Littleton's Constitution of 1954. It has these features to include: 1, the Constitution introduced the federal system of government. Number 2, the lieutenant governors in the regions became known as governors. Number 3, the governor of the country became known as Governor General. Number 4, regional houses of assembly were given residual powers to pass bills into law without the approval from the central government. Number 5, items listed in the concurrent lists, both the central and regional legislatures were to legislate on them. If there was a conflict in the performance of such functions, the central government would prevail. Number 6, it provided for the post of a premier as the leader of government in the regions. The leader of the political party with a majority seats in the General Assembly became premier. Example, Nnamdi Azikiwe was the premier for the Eastern region. Ahmadu Bello was the premier for the North, and Buni Awolowo was the premier for the Western region. Number 7, the Constitution made no provision for the post of a prime minister as head of government in Nigeria. These are the features of the Constitution of Littleton of 1954. It will interest you to know that Macpherson's Constitution of 1951 was revised through constitutional conferences, and then it was the products of these conferences that brought about the next constitution, which came in 1954 by Oliver Littleton. What are the weaknesses of this constitution? Number 1, the constitution did not make provision for the office of a prime minister as head of government for Nigeria, even when there was the Council of Ministers. Number 2, this constitution still retained official members in the federal and regional executives. Number 3, the North had a different electoral system, that is the adult male suffrage, while the East, West, and the Central legislature was direct election based on universal adult suffrage. Number 4, there was Senate as the second chamber at the Central legislature. Number 5, the Constitution still gave veto and reserve powers to the head of states, and even to reject bills, accept or reject advice. These are some of the weaknesses of the Littleton Constitution of 1954. What are the achievements of this constitution? Number 1, it led to the civil service being regionalized. The regions now had its own civil service and the judiciary. Number 2, it gave rise to a federal system of government in Nigeria. That is, today we could say that it was the 1954 constitution that brought about federalism in Nigeria. Number 3, the Supreme Court was established for the country. Number 4, Lagos was removed from the Western region and made a federal capital territory. Number 5, the 2 tiers of government, that is the central and regional, were given specific functions to perform. Number 6, Nigerians became ministers at different levels of government with full ministerial responsibilities. Number 7, it created the offices of a speaker and a deputy speaker in the country's lawmaking houses. These are the achievements of this constitution. Having looked at pre-independence constitutions in Nigeria, we will now go into the independence and post-independence constitution in Nigeria. Remember that when we say pre, we mean those constitutions that existed before Nigeria's independence. As you could see from the ones we have learned, the first one, which was that of Clifford, started in 1922, and then the last which we have discussed, which was Littleton, was in 1954. So these were the constitutions that existed before independence. That is why it is called pre-independence constitution. Having come to the end of that, we would go now to the independence constitution of 1960 in Nigeria. Its main characteristics include the following. Number one, the constitution provided for a democratic parliamentary system of government. Parliamentary system is when we have two people at the Home Affairs, which provides for the office of the president and the office of the prime minister. The president is the head of state, while the prime minister is the head of government, who exercises the real government power. So whenever you hear about parliamentary, don't be confused, so that you will know what it means and be able to explain. Number two, the constitution retained the federal system of government, which was introduced in 1954. Number three, the Governor General was the ceremonial head of state, who stood to represent the Queen. Number four, the head of government and administration was the Prime Minister. Number five, it provided for a bicameral legislature at the center, namely the Senate and the House of Representatives. Number six, each of the three regions had a House of Assembly and a House of Chiefs. Number seven, it provided for a premier as the head of the executive for each of the regions. Also, provision was made for a ceremonial governor for each of the regions. These are some of the characteristics of the Independence Constitution of 1960. We will now go to the weaknesses of the Constitution. Number one, the Independence Constitution of 1960 was a partial one because it did not bring a total sovereignty to the country. The Queen was still the head of state. Number two, even though there was a Supreme Court in the country, yet it had no power over appellate cases. Nigerians could only appeal to the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, which was in London. Number three, there was the possibility of Britain still interfering in the internal affairs of the country as long as the Queen remained the head of state. So these are the weaknesses that the Independence Constitution of 1960 experienced.